Welcome, champions. This is Arcadia. Hey, champions. Yesterday, I made a video saying that I was going to be talking about a question. Basically, what's our favorite characters and what makes them complex? We're going to go into detail in general of what this idea is, but it's going to be me, Sean, and Doug are going to be talking about the subject matter.
So, if we're talking about complex characters, and I think we're talking a little more generally than that, but I have made this observation that I think usually when someone's talking about a complex character, what they mean is that characters they want to root for, but know they shouldn't. Complex characters are usually, someone who has some kind of charisma, maybe some kind of competence, maybe some kind of, moral code or whatever, but also they're a murderer. You know what I mean? And so you want to like them because they're cool or fun in some way, but also they do bad things, and it gets justified. They get described as complex characters, like Mike from Breaking Bad or Jamie Lannister from Game of Thrones or something like that. And, sometimes those characters maybe grow and change. That could be a factor. Sometimes I think, quote-unquote, complex characters are just poorly written. I think sometimes you start off with a character who's interesting in some way, and then, I say a writer or a show or whatever, will want a certain thing to happen, a certain plot line or scene, and they'll have a character do something that they probably wouldn't really do just to move the show in that direction. And it won't really make sense. It'll be contrary to what they might normally do. And sometimes people will call them complex, but really I think it's just bad writing. But I think that interesting characters are what really matters. And sometimes interesting characters are complex, but not always. For example, Ted Lasso, his character is very straightforward. He's not really complex. He's very consistent and straightforward, and also very realistic and very charismatic and likable. It's a hugely popular show, I guess maybe the only thing that isn't realistic about him is how consistently kind-hearted he was. It's hard to find real people like that. Maybe that's why people like it so much, because you want to see that. It is kind of a rare thing. But I have a couple examples in my mind of, I don't know, interesting or complex characters. One is William Money from Unforgiven, Clint Eastwood Western. Won Best Pictures, one of the best movies of all time, much less Westerns. And in the movie, he, in his youth, he was this outlaw. Terrible, murderous bandit in the Old West or whatever. But now he's settled down. He just has a pig farm and 2 kids, and he gets drawn back in, of course. There's been some terrible crime in some local town, and one of his old buddies is coming to get him so they can win the reward money. So, he's going to strap on his guns and ride back in. But it was so interesting because, there's a difference between the young, hotshot 20-year-old who's got no fear of death, riding in to rob the bank, and the 40-something who's got kids and a stable life. He's not as in shape anymore. He's not, he's got different motivations and goals and maybe a different moral code, Anyways, it was just an interesting movie and interesting how they presented him too. Usually in movies, the good guys, the characters that are interesting or we're rooting for whatever, they're just experts at everything. They're karate black belts. They can fly helicopters. They can drive cars over curbs and never get a flat tire. But this Clint Eastwood character, he can barely get on his horse. You know what I mean? It was just a little more realistic to see this guy having regular struggles and everything isn't this perfect ease. I don't know. It kind of, to me, his character and the presentation of his character made the whole story a little more real. And it made it a little more scary when he was in danger. You cared about more than just whether or not the bad guy was killed in the end, and more about, was it even correct to kill the bad guy? I don't know. I think it just adds a lot of depth when you have people not just be perfect cliche-ish, good at everything or bad at everything. Villain, same thing. And that movie did the same thing with Gene Hackman and some of the other characters who weren't just obvious evil bad guys that kick puppies. They're people with depth and motivations and concerns, and some of it you don't like, some of it you do, some of it maybe you don't like, but you at least understand. The other character I like to talk about is Dom Draper from Mad Men, because in some ways especially for the time period that it was set in, he was somewhat progressive. A big plot point of the show was how he was kind of propping up Woman. Like, someone that was his secretary, he made sure they got promoted to be a writer and had respect and authority in the office. And it was, a big thematic element of the show is how it was a man's world, and it was kind of a big deal for him to give credit to this woman and put her in a little bit more of a position of power. And so he's also, generally very clever, and he's good at figuring out how to manage people, whether it's through his advertisement or coworkers or bosses or whatever it is. It's fun and interesting to watch someone be so competent, but also he's constantly cheating on his wife. You know what I mean? He's constantly lying to people and making awful decisions, driving drunk, like things that are also really bad. And you find yourself wanting to root for him, but also so frustrated with him. And I think that's interesting and complex. And I think it's a tribute to the writers when you can make the audience want to root for someone who does bad things. It's not always necessary for every character or every story, but there's a strong crossover between interesting and complex.
To get into more of a little more interactive medium, I was going to talk a little bit about God of War. Yeah. Oh, wow. Complex people. Kratos. Yeah. Big angry guy. That's definitely a really complex character. Well, even if you're just thinking about the original God of War games, he has a reason for being angry. His wife and daughter both killed by his own hands, tricked by the god who he swore to obey. That's terrible. It's awful. The ashes of his family will live on forever on his skin. That's why he's so pale, because he's carrying that weight with him at all times. So he's an extremely complex character, even in the old games. But as a lot of players are starting to remember Kratos now, it's for Dad of War, as it's been jokingly called, where you are Kratos, the dad, walking around with your kid, going through Norse mythology and learning about not just yourself, but about your kid, about each other, and about the world. And as simple as the game might sound, it is incredibly complex. The different types of people that Kratos used to interact with, that he's currently interacting with, all the ways that he has to navigate through the both literal and figurative waters of conversation and the world, of trying to be this godly figure to his son, but also being a god himself and showing that gods are as human as we are.
So, in general, we know we've talked about whether it be movies or games or TV shows, there's a lot of different types of characters with lots of complexity, and we try to implement that into our show, Arcadia for Omen. We have many facets to our characters, and we try to challenge them on how to deal with basically a lot of different situations, whether it be someone who's dealing with a divorce in real life, and they are trying to not take it upon themselves to like piss people off in the game, or trying to run, some type of leadership role and balancing their personal belief with what is best for the people that they are in charge of, or as like some people may have like ulterior motives that they're trying to basically hide from people, what they're really trying to do, and may just wind up backstabbing them in the long run. We really try to dig deep into it. Now, of course, I'm being vague, but in general, we just wanted to do this video on what makes some of our why we like complex characters, and we want to make more videos. What dives deeper into the situations we put forth with our characters in the next couple of videos to come.
Tell us, what are some of your favorite complex characters? What are some of the shows that really delve into the complexity that characters can be written as and or acted. But also look forward to next week when we may talk about what makes characters feel real. And as always, stay ever vigilant.